In today's Sunday Times magazine, there is a photograph on the front of Hillary Clinton, and she's in London. She's been interviewed at some length by Christina Lamb of the Sunday Times, and she's here because she's got a book. She's launching a book. It's called What Happened, and it's why she didn't become the President of the United States of America. And none of it's her fault. Absolutely. In fact, she's never, ever got anything wrong in her entire life. It's because of horrible, awful, vile people. People who were behind Brexit that then dared to get themselves involved in the American elections. She speaks of Farage with disgust. He came to the US to campaign for Trump and spent half of his remarks insulting me in a very personal way and talking about Trump as an alpha male, the silverback gorilla. I think of those images and what that says about what is acceptable and what's not. So I'm not acceptable. I'm looking forward, actually, to reading a bit more of the book. The book is available. It's on sale for £20, published by Simon & Schuster. It's called What Happened, but perhaps should be renamed The Great Big Whinge. So there.
Hillary Clinton slamming Nigel Farage. She gave an interview with the Sunday Times, that's a London newspaper, and here's the quote. He, that's Farage, came to the US to campaign for Trump and spent half of his remarks insulting me in a very personal way and talking about Trump as the alpha male, the silver-backed gorilla. Think of those images and what that says about what's acceptable and what's not. Fox News contributor Nigel Farage joins us now. He always smiles. There you go. I knew he would smile eventually. All right, you got to give us your response to what was a very strong attack on you in the Sunday Times.
Yes, it really was. I mean, Hillary is here in London selling her book, What Happened. It's £20 a go. Clearly the Clintons haven't made enough money yet. And it's a book that should be renamed, in my opinion, The Great Whinge, because none of the reasons she lost the presidency is to do with her. It's because the world is a very unfair place, and it's full of horrible, beastly, nasty people that are not Clinton supporters, people like me. The idea that I spent much of my speech in Mississippi on Hillary Clinton is ludicrous. I simply said, if I was an American citizen, I wouldn't vote for her if you paid me. She, of course, responded in kind the next day, last August, by calling me all the names under the sun. I was labelled a white supremacist and goodness knows what else. Look, I think the upshot of this is very simple. I think it's important in life to be judged by your enemies. And if Hillary Clinton is a sworn enemy of mine, I reckon I'm in a pretty good place.
Nigel, can I just explain for our viewers the use of the word to whinge? Whinging is complaining or whining. It's an Anglo-Australian word which you've now introduced into America, and I think it might fly.
Anyway, but it really is, what a sad sight, isn't it? To see somebody that can't accept that perhaps the main reason she lost is because she, from the start, gave this sense of entitlement, as if, it was the crown that was due to be placed on her head. She was arrogant, she was out of touch, she didn't go out and meet voters and citizens, and yet somehow it's all everybody else's fault, including mine. I have a funny feeling this book is not going to sell very well here in the UK.
I want to draw your attention to, you know what's going on here. This is Catalonia. Thousands of protesters over the weekend were demonstrating in favour of national unity, opposing the breakaway of Catalonia. Now, it seemed to us, from a distance, we're here in America, we're looking at Europe, it seems like it was heading towards kind of balkanization, splitting up into very, very small countries. But maybe that's not the case. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, let's get a sense of perspective here. 20 years ago, the number of Catalans that wanted to separate from Spain was about 15 to 20%. Over the last few years, that's risen, and in some polls, it's been as high as 40%. But what happened on October the 1st, when the local Catalan government tried to hold a referendum, and the Spanish police used the Spanish government used 10,000 police to stop people voting, literally dragging elderly women out of polling stations by their hair to stop them voting. Since then, I have a feeling that actually those who now want to separate from Spain have grown. Sure, there are two sides to this debate, but what is an absolute fact is the Spanish government, and this is supposed to be a modern democracy, they're supposed to have moved on from the days of General Franco and fascism. Their behaviour has been so awful that I think that Catalan separation and independence has got a little bit of wind in its sails now.
We shall see. Nigel, thanks for joining us. Always appreciated. We'll see you again soon. Thanks very much. Back to Hillary Clinton and what I just did in my editorial there. She called Trump voters deplorable, racist, xenophobes, you name it. Roll tape.
Just be grossly generalistic. You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
Nigel Farage is with us. He's the former UK Independence Party leader. He's the man who led the Brits out of the European Union. Now, Nigel, there's a bit of a delay in us speaking here, so I can't have a normal conversation with you. But let me just ask you a question, then you take it. They said exactly the same thing about you, did they not, when you were organising Brexit? Go.
Oh, yes. I mean, in fact, when David Cameron once was asked about UKIP voters, and I quote, he said they are loonies, fruitcakes, and closet racists mostly. Well, that was nice of the Prime Minister, wasn't it, to talk about millions of British people. And what happened during the referendum was they said that Leave voters are old, angry, ill-educated, and motivated by racist thoughts. Now, the reason for doing that was to say to people in the middle, to say to undecided voters, look, for goodness sake, if you vote Leave the EU, you are joining up with this appalling group of people. And that's exactly the same game that Hillary was trying to play just a few days ago. And when she used the word deplorables, well, I'll tell you what I think. I think only one person comes out of this deplorably, and that's Hillary Clinton. Part of that same kind of elite that I saw in London, but in this case based in Washington, who has absolutely no understanding of how ordinary people live their lives.
Now, excuse me, earlier this morning, Donald Trump, and I believe you have appeared with Donald Trump, you appeared with him in Mississippi a couple of weeks ago. You're basically a supporter of Donald Trump. He came out this morning and said that what Hillary had said over the weekend was one of the biggest mistakes of this political season. I take it you agree with him, and do you agree that what she said will actually turn a lot of people to Trump and not enhance her own support? Go.
Well, what we've seen, I think, over the Western world, you know, last 10, 20 years, is this new sort of political aristocracy that have taken over. And the Clinton family in America, you know, sum that up rather beautifully. And they are very out of touch with the views of ordinary people. And if they think by insulting the silent majority, they're doing themselves a favour by effectively demeaning people, by demonising people, then they were in for a big shock in Brexit, and I suspect she's in for a big shock in this American campaign as well. And I'll tell you why. People simply have had enough of being sneered at by out-of-touch, professional career political elites.
Nigel, you can't hear them, but I know a few of our viewers will be cheering you on big time this morning, and we thank you very much for coming back on the show. Nigel Farage, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I was always told that it was a very good thing in life to be judged by your enemies. And if Mrs. Clinton is now my avowed, sworn enemy, I must be getting something right. Look, she represents so much that has gone wrong over the course of the last couple of decades. These political elites who work pretty much hand in glove with the giant multinational businesses, where frankly the relationships between money and politics are so blurred that in the minds of many people, frankly, it begins to look corrupt. She represents a kind of politics that has seen us, you in the States and us here, meddling endlessly in the Middle East getting involved in military conflicts in situations about which we have very little knowledge, and frankly, we've made things, I think, quite a lot worse. And she represents a kind of privileged elite that pretends at election time that it represents ordinary folk and their aspirations, but actually is about self. So I think that Hillary Clinton is a truly awful candidate, and frankly, I think the worst I've ever seen in the States. And if she were to win this presidency, all the same bad old things would just continue.
You caught Mrs. Clinton's attention when Donald Trump introduced you. I haven't heard your assessment of her as a candidate.
Well, I was always told that it was a very good thing in life to be judged by your enemies. And if Mrs. Clinton is now my avowed, sworn enemy, I must be getting something right. Look, she represents so much that has gone wrong over the course of the last couple of decades. These political elites who work pretty much hand in glove with the giant multinational businesses, where frankly the relationships between money and politics are so blurred that in the minds of many people, frankly, it begins to look corrupt. She represents a kind of politics that has seen us, you in the States and us here, meddling endlessly in the Middle East, getting involved in military conflicts in situations about which we have very little knowledge, and frankly, we've made things, I think, quite a lot worse. And she represents a kind of privileged elite that pretends at election time that it represents ordinary folk and their aspirations, but actually is about self. So I think that Hillary Clinton is a truly awful candidate, and frankly, I think the worst I've ever seen in the States. And if she were to win this presidency, all the same bad old things would just continue.
Nigel Farage, thanks for being with us.